Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Louisiana Spotlight. I'm Andre Morrow, Managing Editor here at LPB. I am currently standing on the newest land in Louisiana. While acres of marshes and coastland wash away each year, here at Spanish Pass, near the mouth of the Mississippi River, the land, the coast, is actually growing. Why is the coast near Spanish Pass growing? Because of the Louisiana Coastal Master Plan, a 50-year, $50 billion blueprint which concentrates efforts to restore, sustain, and protect Louisiana's coastal ecosystem and communities. The 50-year plan puts science and engineering into action with projects that focus on marsh creation, barrier island and headland restoration, shoreline protection, sediment diversion, ridge restoration, flood risk and reduction. The need for projects like this are growing stronger every year. I've covered the coast for decades and I've watched it shrink and in some cases disappear, while the storms that the coast protects us from, they get bigger and bigger. It was after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in 2005 when the state legislature decided Louisiana needed a comprehensive master plan to protect from future storms and restore the dwindling coast. Restitution monies from the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010 would assist as a catalyst to put large portions of that plan into action.
The master plan has been the guiding document since the original master plan in 2007, but it really changed in 2012 when it became a much more focused plan. And nearly all the projects that CPRA has pursued since 2012 have come from past master plans.
We're at the LSU Center for River Studies in Baton Rouge, a center built to showcase the work of the Louisiana Coastal Master Plan and its projects. When you look around, this is sort of shows all of the things that are happening and that will happen to restore Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an area that really tells the story of coastal Louisiana. So if you look up here on the map, everything obviously here that's in red has been lost. But if you were to overlay this red area of the map to existing land that is in place today, several parishes in this portion of the state would essentially be gone. And so when you're losing land mass at the rate that we are, not only is your environment disappearing, your wetlands are disappearing, and obviously that's an environmental concern, but your inland communities become more and more vulnerable to strengthening storms.
And strengthening storms is something that Louisiana knows all too well. In the Southwest, communities today are still recovering from Hurricane Laura, which left a path of destruction in 2020. But despite catastrophic wind damage, the city of Lake Charles was spared from Laura's 17-foot storm surge. Chip explains it was thanks to this area of the state's natural storm buffer.
There is a reason why that water did not reach I-10. Yes, there was a shift in the storm, but it was because of the natural buffer that exists in Cameron Parish, because of the shoreline, because of our terracing, our ridges, our marsh that helped knock down that storm surge. And the statistic that we always tell the public is for every 2 miles of wetlands that exist on the ground, storm surge can be knocked down by 1 foot. So that natural buffer is really helping protect our inland levee protection systems, our hurricane risk reduction systems that are helping protect us.
And that's the reason behind an ongoing pursuit of updating Louisiana's Coastal Master Plan. As South Louisiana continues to change, so does the technology and information available to help predict and restore our state's fragile coast.
So it's a 50-year plan, but we also update it every 6 years. And so it's really setting our priorities for the next 6 years, and we will update this plan. We may learn new information that requires us to change course, but this is intended to guide our decision-making in the near term, not just looking 50 years into the future.
that there's been incredible progress made over the last several years in restoring and protecting South Louisiana, from over 70 miles of barrier islands, which is our first line of defense. So anytime you have a storm that's coming on shore, that first speed bump that a surge is going to hit or our barrier islands. Close to 70,000 acres of new land have been created by dredging and pumping sediment. But then I think the thing that is probably most comforting to the public is that over 300 miles of new levees have been built since 2007. So 300 miles, get in your car and drive from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Birmingham, Alabama. That's a lot of levees. And so if you build every single project that's included in the master plan, you have the overwhelming majority of people that are protected by some sort of system, and then you can create over 200,000 acres of new land. And to me, that's worth every single penny.
But there are plenty of people in Louisiana who don't see eye to eye on how that money is spent. The current Coastal Master Plan brings a price tag of $50 billion with it, which could increase, and more than half of the projects not yet funded. The effort to restore coastal Louisiana could also bring change to generations of people who live and work there. Some argue you can't put a price on culture.
26 million of that money is going to go to oysters. What's 26 million going to do for a lifetime? Because you're not talking about a one-time deal. We're not, we're talking about the lifetime. They're buying my lifetime out, but they're not actually giving me any money. And 26 million won't touch, what we losing. I don't want their money. I want my livelihood.
To get a closer look at the Louisiana Coastal Master Plan in action, we went by airboat to one of the latest dredging projects, this one near Venice. I'm with Brad Miller, who is the project manager of the Spanish Pass Restoration. That's what we're seeing right here. This was not land not too long ago.
That's correct, Andre. Everything you see here about 2 years ago was all open water, and this project is restoring that to land and some ridge habitat. We're building about 1,600 acres of marsh and ridge. The project is one of the biggest projects that CPR has ever built. In total, it's going to be about 7 miles long. There's 1,600 acres. Right now, we're about 3/4 of the way done, but the dredge is actually about 9 miles away in the river, pumping this sediment from the river bottom to create land. A big project like this usually takes 2 or 3 years to design and permit and get land rights and funding secured.
This is a time lapse of the land built here since August 2021. The construction is projected to be completed later this year.
So you've been on this, you can see the end in sight, but you don't see what it's going to be like 40, 50 years from now. What's the overall process of what this is being done here, and what's it going to do for the master plan?
Well, the master plan has a variety of projects in it, project types in it, and this is a big land building project. So we expect it to be here many years down the road, and in the future, other projects will come behind it in this area and other areas to build land around it through either dredging or even sediment diversions to help build new land into the future.
It take me 25 years in the future. We're standing right here, 25 years. What are we seeing?
Well, we should see a nice ridge with some woody vegetation on it and a beautiful marsh platform.
Full-grown trees, marsh, things intact and tight.
That's the intent. Yep, a fully functioning wetland where there was open water previously.
There's a lot to unpack there, but we're lucky to have coastal restoration experts here with us in our LPB studios to help us get a better understanding of the Louisiana Master Plan. First of all, Dr. Linda Bowie is an environmental sciences professor at LSU and an ecosystem ecologist who specializes in the impacts of human-mediated and natural disasters on coastal systems. Chris McClendon is a geologist and owner of McClendon Geosciences, which studies the geology of coastal Louisiana and the drivers of change of our coastal wetlands. And Chris Macaluso is the director for the Center of Marine Fisheries at the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. There, he works to develop projects that address fisheries, habitat restoration, and improve access to fisheries throughout the Gulf Coast. So I want to start by hearing about some of the work that all of you do with the coast and its ecosystems. And Dr. Bowie, I'm going to start with you.
I'm an ecosystem ecologist, and I ask questions about new land. If they build it, will all the organisms come? Yes, they will. And we ask, if they do come, is it the same as created, are the created marshes the same as natural marshes? And I also study cypress trees, cypress swamps, and ask questions about why we have ghost forests emerging in Louisiana and how we can solve those problems.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. McClendon, I want to hear about the work that you do and have done.
I'm a geologist. I worked in the oil and gas industry for 40 years. And my emphasis for the past 10 years has been bringing subsurface geology to the surface and examining the impacts there. So I've been fortunate to be able to work with local universities on research projects. And we're in the process of trying to bring that into the fold, as it were, for coastal planning and project design.
Mr. Macaluso?
Well, I'm a lifelong Louisiana avid outdoorsman, hunter, fisherman. I've been given an opportunity to work for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership for the last decade, and we've really focused on helping to develop better federal and state legislation, better policy when it comes to coastal restoration work in Louisiana and really throughout the Gulf and all across the country. But my focus is here in Louisiana along the Gulf Coast and working with lawmakers and policymakers and kind of building the connection between them and the hunters and fishermen here in Louisiana who are concerned about coastal land loss.
When I ask, have you or all of your organizations worked with the CPRA to propose projects for this master plan or past master plans? I'll begin with you. You used to work for the CPRA.
I did. I was a communications director when the CPRA was first established after Hurricane Katrina. So for about 5 years through hurricanes, through several hurricanes and also the oil spill, I served as a communications director for CPRA and worked on a couple of master plans, and then I transitioned into working for a nonprofit. And a lot of the projects that you see in the master plan, like the diversions, like Barrier Island restoration, like the plan moving forward for oyster reef restoration, which, oyster reefs are critically important to recreational fishing. Those are all projects that we've pushed for, advocated for, and helped work on the policy and the funding for.
Well, that's something that brings me to you, Dr. Bowie, because you and Louisiana oyster farmers proposed a project for the current master plan. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I worked with in Plaquemines Parish with some oyster fishers, and we proposed brood reefs, basically reefs that would be not harvested and left alone, but used the oyster fishers' expertise to build those, to decide where they are. And I can see that that's been implemented in some of these integrated projects in the master plan.
Thank you so much. Mr. McClendon, have you worked with the CPRA?
I have.
And if you have, exactly in which capacity?
I have proposed projects through McClendon Geosciences, but probably more importantly, I submitted comments on the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion for the environmental impact statement.
And what kind of reaction have you got?
None. But this was done jointly with 2 university professors. We recognize there's a fault crossing the diversion site. We recommended a thorough geological evaluation, and unfortunately it wasn't taken into consideration.
So that's not happened?
No.
Is there a major problem going forward with that?
I'm concerned. Yeah, I mean, we know historically that faults have caused crevasse of the river. That's an accepted fact. So.
And what does that mean exactly?
So in this case, it happened prior to the artificial levee, so the natural levee is breached,
right,
and the flow of the river flows uncontrolled out onto the land surface. Today, that would be an utterly catastrophic event.
Okay. Speaking of diversions, there are many types of projects that make up the Louisiana Master Plan, but none have been in the news more than river diversions. A future without action paints a grim picture for coastal Louisiana.
We did this by building the levees after the flood of 27 for flood control and navigation of the Mississippi River, but we didn't have a mandate for erosion restoration. We didn't know what it was going to do. For 90 years now, we haven't replaced it. It's just sinking out of sight, and salt water intrudes in, and here we are, and we lost 2,400 square miles of Louisiana.
The reason we have a coastal master plan is because of the levees that came up along the Mississippi River after the 1927 flood. Those levees kept the sediment from depositing and continuing to build onto Louisiana. It was foretold in an 1897 National Geographic article. It said maybe not this generation or the next, but later generations will feel the effects of this silt not being deposited, and they will have to deal with it then. It's exactly what we're doing now.
And if you look to your right, you'll see where the levee used to be.
Captain Ryan Lambert has worked on the river for more than 40 years and runs a hunting and fishing guide service out of Buras. He knows firsthand the power of the river. Here at Neptune Pass near Buras, we see how quickly the coastal marsh can be revived when the Mississippi River is allowed to naturally deposit its sediment across the landscape.
2 years ago, that was the bank of Bay Denise right there, that line of land there. And everything that you see inside of that, as far as you can see, was all open water. 20 years ago, you'd be in here with a double lugger fishing for shrimp. Look at it now. What a success story.
Every area that is connected to a river today are the only areas in Louisiana that are actively building land. Look in the Wax Lake outlet in south central Louisiana. Look at Neptune Pass on the east bank of the Mississippi River, Mardi Gras Pass, and then even some of the freshwater diversions that we have that are designed to manage salinity regimes within a particular basin. While those freshwater diversions aren't designed to build land, they actually are.
This is the Davis Pond diversion, located in St. Charles Parish. Created in 2009, this freshwater river diversion was designed to reduce saltwater intrusion in the upper Barataria Basin.
So I'm just going to take a soil core here because this is new land building here.
But what has since been observed is that sediment deposited over time has aided wetland growth.
From here to here is all brand new mineral sediment deposited by the diversion. And you can tell that because it's all clay and silty. And then here, from here down, it's basically pure organic matter that was existing before. I'll give that a foot, it might be a little more, but a foot of deposition 4 miles from the mouth of the diversion, from a diversion that wasn't supposed to build land.
So when you talk about coastal restoration, it's not one single effort. It's obviously a single program, but it's a portfolio of different concepts.
It only seems natural to harness the power of the river to rebuild coastal Louisiana.
That river has the ability to help sustain the land that is in place today and the land that we're building through some of our dredging projects.
Right. But a dramatic change in this ecosystem could have an adverse effect on the generations of people who utilize the coast for their livelihood.
You know, one thing about the Coastal Master Plan, there is a lot of good things in it, a lot of good things. But there are some bad things. And if we don't get those bad things changed, if we don't change the course, like the diversions and stuff going straight into, seafood producing areas, it's definitely going to deal a death blow.
There are impacts there. There are impacts that we recognize. But you had a sustainable fishery in this state prior to the Mississippi River being levied. And so are there going to be impacts? Yes. It's a willingness to adapt, a willingness to change. Because if we don't, the scenario that is in front of South Louisiana is an unacceptable one.
Mr. McClendon, one aspect of past master plans has been the river diversions that have created a lot of controversy. You study the geology of Louisiana coast extensively, and as a geologist, how do you see river diversions fitting into the master plan?
I think it depends primarily on location. So diverting the flow of the river into an open body of water, such as Wax Lake Outlet or Neptune Pass, is going to allow for immediate deposition of sediment at the mouth of that opening. Diverting 50,000 to 150,000 cubic feet per second of flow into saline and brackish marsh is going to mean that flow has to cut a channel to open water. So there's going to be a significant amount of erosion initially at a site like the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion. There's also going to be quite a bit of flooding of the saline and brackish marshes, which is going to cause some wetlands loss itself, as is seen at the outflow of the Carnarvon diversion. So the question is, are the subsequent gains due to sediment deposition going to outweigh the initial losses? And I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. My concern is the point where they're attempting to build that new land with the subsequent gains is right across an active geological fault, which has throughout geological history been the primary driver of subsidence in South Louisiana. So there's going to be a challenge at that location for that new land to maintain elevation. And that's my concern.
Dr. Bowie, what he just said, your reaction to that?
We know that we can't just take our measurement and look at it during the changes that are happening. We have to sort of look at the long game.
Right.
And so we have to not look at the disturbed system, but look at how the system bounces back after the disturbance. And we know that the system will bounce back.
Will bounce back. Mr. Macaluso?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Bowie is saying is what I've observed in the areas where I like to go fishing, you know, especially on the east side of the river or western Terrebonne Parish, where you're seeing a lot of sediment input into the system. You see a lot of freshwater interaction in those places, and subsequently you see healthier marsh. You see a healthier ecosystem that's capable of producing a much more diverse set of fisheries or wildlife habitat. And what I'm really concerned about is, as Mr. Klein said in the piece, the prospect of us doing nothing is pretty grim, especially for the Barataria Basin. We lost 100 square miles from Hurricane Ida alone, and that was after the CPRA had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in barrier island restoration and ridge restoration through sediment deposition and through dredges. Without the diversion there to feed those projects, without the nutrients and the sediment coming out of the Mississippi River to kickstart that habitat, you're going to see your fisheries in the Barataria Basin continue to decline pretty precipitously.
The master plan is a 50-year, $50 billion plan, and some are asking if the cost is worth the reward with the accelerated rate of sea level rise and subsidence. Is the science strong enough to bank on the fact that this is what we're doing and this is what we need to do? Mr. McClendon, start with you.
Yep, so one of the really interesting things that I've become aware of is the data coming out of the CRIMS network, Coastwide Reference Monitoring System, 400 stations across the coast. We saw the accretion at Davis Pond. That magnitude of accretion is happening all across South Louisiana. 75% of the stations in the Delta region are gaining elevation relative to a fixed rod. So it's a little bit of a misconception that we've lost a sediment supply. There's a fairly robust sediment supply, and it's coming from the tidal influx. And those values, the values of accretion currently in most stations are greater than the rate of subsidence plus sea level rise. So yeah, the opportunities for sustainability are significant, and I'm very optimistic about it long term.
Dr. Bowie, same thing. Is the science strong enough that we can bank on the land that we're building staying?
I can give you a couple examples. Throughout the master plan, the amount of science, the models are very robust. Also looking at Ryan Lambert's project that he got funded by Ducks Unlimited, where he built the land coming out of Neptune Pass by creating crevasses and slowing down the river with terraces. He's built 400 acres in 2 years for about the cost of about $200 an acre. And so I think that's evidence that we're on the right track with the science.
What's being attempted here in Louisiana and what's being done, is there any other place in the world that can compare to this?
I mean, I think when you look at some of the large-scale watersheds in this country, like the Everglades, like the Chesapeake Basin, they are attempting it. The Everglades got a pretty extensive list of projects, and really, there's a lot of analogies to be drawn with what's happening in the Everglades and what's happening in coastal Louisiana, in which the plumbing has been broken, essentially, and we're trying to plug some of the natural plumbing back into the system to move the water and the sediment and the nutrients where it needs to go. I think to the extent that Louisiana's having to deal with sea level rise and subsidence and things like that, I don't think anywhere else in this country especially is dealing with it on that scale.
Right. What do all of you hope to see from future coastal master plans? Dr. Bowie, I'll start with you.
I think that they need to continue to engage the science as they've done. I would like to see them engage the community as they've done, maybe engage the community a little sooner in the planning before they get their plans decided. And I'd like to see it implemented. I'd like to see and I like the regional decisions that they're making. How they're going to make decisions on a regional basis instead of a per project basis. So I think it's looking up.
Thoughts for you, Mr. McClendon?
What I would like to see is a shift away from a conceptual approach where we're going to build new land. We want to walk away from a project with a measurement of how much land we've just built to looking at how land is actually built into coastal wetlands. And a lot of it is just a wide distribution of sediment that you can't actually put a measure on immediately. So there's an infilling of interior ponds from tidal flux, and be willing to accept that we're going to engage in some things. And I support the idea of putting sediment berms along the edges of the marshes and just letting them wash in. And it might take 10 years to be able to measure that change. But if we can do that, I think ultimately working with nature in that way is going to prove to be the best long-term sustainability approach.
And Mr. Macaluso, your thoughts?
I think funding is critically important, so I'd really like to see the plan address some of that. And I think sediment management in the future is going to be critically important too. As the sediment comes out of these diversions, as we get the sustainability and really hopefully the uptick in fisheries that we see from that nutrient, that sediment, and that habitat being returned, we do need to find a way to manage the sediment, to put it in the places where it can best be used to capture additional sediment, where it can aid in navigation, for instance. I mean, we are going to block some boating access through introducing sediment, so we need to work on those things. And I think another thing is, looking at the parts of the coast that are getting fresh water right now and how the commercial fisheries and recreational fisheries interact with those areas, and taking those practices into the areas where fresh water is going to be reintroduced, I think would help the recreational fishermen, the charter fishermen, the commercial fishermen in those areas understand better how to adapt to what's going to come in the future.
There's a lot to think about, isn't there? A lot of cause and effect also. I want to thank all of you for your thoughtful input. We will continue this conversation with our final panel, but first, hear from the chairman of the Oyster Task Force. We sat down with third-generation oyster farmer and marina owner Mitch Jurisic to hear some of the issues he is facing due to the Coastal Master Plan. Mitch, we are in your domain here in Empire. Tell us a little bit about this place. You've got a marina which has cabins, restaurant, a lot of stuff.
We're a full-service marina. We have live bait. We have the restaurant upstairs, open Thursday through Sunday. The marina's open 7 days a week, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I bought it back in 2019.
I'd like to hear about your role as a lead spokesperson with the Oyster
Right, I'm
Fishermen of Louisiana.
I'm the chairman of the Louisiana Oyster Task Force. We're like a governing body that brings recommendations to the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
Now with the CPRA and with the Coastal Master Plan, there are aspects of that I suspect you're not wild about.
One thing we don't want and we don't need is fresh water being introduced directly into our oyster growing areas from the river.
Which is what would happen in the diversion project.
The mid-Barataria sediment diversion and the mid-Breton sediment diversion will be the nail in our coffin.
So you talked to CPRA about
We
this.
talked to the CPRA the last 10
council
years.
meetings and parish meetings?
Last 10 years.
And?
We've been talking and we've sent letters. We've tried to convince them, let's build land by dredging, not diverting.
Although the Oystermen and Plaquemines Parish would prefer dredging to rebuild the coastline, the cost and labor of dredging the Mississippi River and piping its sediment miles away far exceeds the cost of river diversions. But Oystermen, like Mitch, are saying the numbers just aren't adding up.
You know, just recently the mid-Barataria sediment diversion, got funded.
Sure.
And permitted and funded. They could take that $2.25 billion and in 5 years build 47 square miles of land. The diversion is projected to possibly build 21 square miles in the next 50 years, but lose 50 square miles in that time frame. To me, that's not a good use of money. This is one-time funds that are coming in, and you should be using it wisely.
Right. With that coming at some point, how have you looked ahead to plan for maybe some changes you have to make in your business?
Terrebonne Parish will still be all right. Lafourche Parish, Jefferson Parish, the West Bank of Plaquemines Parish is going to be almost void of any oysters, any oyster production. So it's very tough to move. I'm third generation, and my time's getting short.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very tough for me to have to move, and there's not really no other areas to move to. What CPRA tells everyone, oh, we'll just have to travel a little further. We'll have to do this. There is no further to go. We're already at the Gulf, and the Gulf's coming at us.
So what are you expecting?
I'm expecting within the first 6 months for the salinities to be near zero on the backside of Grand Isle. All our recreational fishing, commercial fishing, shrimp, crabs, oysters, the speckled trout, redfish, they're gonna disappear, because they need salinities of 15 parts per thousand or higher to successfully spawn. We won't have that in this estuary anymore. It's not just going to stop at the fishermen. It's going to be places like these marinas, the local grocery store, because you're not just losing your fisheries. You're losing culture, heritage, you're taking away. We're exploring all our options. We're going to do whatever we have to do to try to convince them, hey, let's stop and rethink
Anyone
this.
you want to tell us about?
Oh, one of them is eventually going to wind up a lawsuit. The fishermen are going to have to get together. We're going to have to come up with some way of trying to stop this thing. And the only way is sad to say, may be a lawsuit.
The issues are complex, and there are clearly many differing interests in this Louisiana Master Plan. We're lucky there to have some of the architects of the Master Plan and experts who will dictate its future here with us in studio. Joining us again is Dr. Linda Bowie, an environmental scientist expert at LSU and ecosystems ecologist specializing in the impacts of disasters on our coastal systems. Bryn Haas is the executive director of the CPRA, which has developed and released the 2023 Master Plan this past January. And Representative Joseph Orgeron represents District 54 in Jefferson and Lafourche parishes and is the executive director of Restore or Retreat. That's a nonprofit coastal advocacy group. I'd like to start by getting some initial reactions to the piece that we just heard. The river diversions have been some of the most contentious reactions and parts of this master plan and all the discussions leading up to this. We just heard from Mr. Jurisic. So let me begin with you, Mr. Haas. As you just heard this piece, how do you respond to it?
Sure. Well, we know Mitch quite well and have had, as he mentioned in that piece, lots of discussions with him about coastal Louisiana and what we need to do to try to help restore it and try to save it. And the good news is that we agree on an awful lot of that, right? He is interested in us dredging, building marshes, building ridges, building barrier islands, and so forth, and we're doing just that. We've got 3,000 square miles of those kinds of projects under construction as we sit here today, just in Plaquemines Parish alone. But where we do disagree and where we differ is in the fact that we believe we need to try to be doing that in a more sustainable way. And so when you dredge to create wetlands, you're not doing anything to fundamentally address the causes of that wetland land loss in the first place. But projects like the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion can do just that. Not only can they build and sustain coastal wetlands on their own, but they can help sustain the projects that we're building in the Barataria Basin right now through dredging. So it's not an either or. We're not in a situation in Louisiana where we have the luxury to just do one kind of a project, only do barrier islands, only do marsh creation, only do ridges, or only do diversions for that matter. We've got to have all hands on deck and really throw everything we've got at this problem.
Okay, Representative Orgeron, let me ask you.
I agree, and I've worked with Mitch in doing legislation to move some of the task force members to adjust basically with the incoming changes. I agree that we need the full toolbox that CPRA offers, and those river diversions and the freshwater introduction, I think, is a cost that we need to do. We need to add those into the toolbox in order to make the solution sustainable.
And Dr. Bowie?
We need the best minds at the table, including the oyster fishers. And I think that they've come to the table, we've listened to them, and there are oysters incorporated into the master plan in some of the integrated projects and brood reefs, and we need their expertise in order to build those in an appropriate way.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Haas, we're just starting to see the fruits of the labor of some of the past master plans. So is the master plan going as was hoped when it began?
I think it is. I think our overall coastal program is in a really, really good spot. I think you could say we're sort of in the golden age, if you will, of the evolution of our coastal program. We've secured about $20 billion in funding to help implement the master plan over the last 15 years or so. We've built about 300 miles of levees. We have rebuilt or restored about 70 miles of our barrier islands along the coast. We've dredged over 190 million cubic yards of sediment. That's enough sediment to fill 42 superdomes, just to give you an idea. All of those projects have benefited over 50,000 acres of our coastal wetlands. We're building today the largest projects that we've ever built, both from a marsh creation perspective. We're talking about projects that really are game changers in the diversions as well here today. And so we're on a really good trajectory, I think, in the coastal program.
Representative Orgeron, your district has some of the fastest eroding areas of coastline in the nation, actually. Tell us more about your organization, what it does, Restore or Retreat.
20 years old, founded in 2003. We basically focus on, as you said, the two most rapidly eroding basins, that being the Barataria Basin and the Terrebonne Basin, which also are two of the most productive for both commercial seafood as well as energy resources to fuel the nation. So 20 years ago, it was seen that the people of Lower Lafourche and Terrebonne and that area wanted to put together a nonprofit to advocate for large-scale restoration projects that would benefit that particular area, that estuary, make it sustainable. And that's what we're fighting for.
Now, we spoke with Captain Ryan Lambert, who is the owner of Cajun Fishing Adventures in Buras. He says the threats to our coast are quickly moving their way inland. Take a look.
Things that people need to realize, it's not coastal erosion. It's Louisiana erosion. 100 miles inland, St. Charles, St. James Parish, they're in jeopardy. The water is lapping at their door. And since Hurricane Ida, we lost 106 square miles of land that were protecting us from storm surge. It's no longer there. If we don't start putting things upriver, way north towards St. John Parish, and letting it flow those bayous, we don't have a chance.
Mr. Haas, would you tell us a little bit more about this Maurepas Swamp project in the area and where it stands?
Sure. So the Maurepas Swamp diversion is a freshwater diversion in St. James Parish around Hope Canal that's designed to deliver freshwater and nutrients to a swamp, one of the largest swamps, coastal swamps in America at this point in time, that has been deteriorating for the last 100 years since it's been cut off from the Mississippi River.
Well, let me keep you here for a second. We've also heard a lot, of course, about the Mid-Barataria Diversion Project, which was recently approved and funded. So what is the difference between a diversion like that Mid-Barataria and the Maurepas project.
Yeah, so there's some fundamental differences in the areas that they're designed to restore, right? So in the Barataria Basin, you've literally got areas that were once land that are now open water. The land has sunk below the water surface or it has eroded away. So you've got essentially a hole that you need to fill. And so the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion is really designed to deliver large amounts of sediments into the basin to help fill those holes, rebuild those wetlands, and nourish the wetlands that are already there. In the case of the Maurepas Swamp, the swamp is still there. It's just not healthy. It's not growing and it's deteriorating. And eventually will convert to marsh and likely convert to open water. And so the idea would be to, again, introduce some fresh water and nutrients to help stimulate the growth of those trees, hopefully grow some new trees in that region, or make the area more conducive to planting trees for new growth to help preserve what's already there.
So let's take a look at Mitch Jurisic one last time. I had a question from him and the risks being too high when it comes to the Mid-Barataria diversion.
They're willing to kill us all off on a maybe. Think about 50 years. We're not going to be here. They're not going to be here. So if it was a mistake, it doesn't matter to them. But they've sold it to so many people that a lot of people believe that this is the solution. What's happening now is we're starting to see that tide turn a little bit. We're starting to see more environmental groups getting together and saying, hey, we want to save the environment, but not at the cost of all the wildlife, all the fish, dolphins.
The Army Corps of Engineers released an environmental impact statement that said the Mid-Barataria diversion would have major adverse impacts on eastern oysters and brown shrimp, and there would be a functional extinction of dolphins in the area. Well, some would say this does more harm than good. I want to ask all of you to respond to this, and what do you say about those concerns, and to fishermen like Mr. Jurisic who say it's too big a gamble? Dr. Bowie, let me start with you.
I think we have to look at historically what Barataria Bay looked like. It had much, much more land, which the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion is to deliver that, right? It is that sediment comes on fresh water, but the fresh water was there before we impounded and put levees on the Mississippi River. And so it's using the power of nature to rebuild nature. And so, yes, there are trade-offs. We have lots of dolphins in lots and lots of places. I love dolphins as much as anybody, but they're not an endangered species. The shrimp are going to move to other places. We can support fishers to go to where the fish are going to go. They will move. But the other thing is, what people are ignoring is how amazing that estuary is going to be. You're going to have bass, lots of different kinds of bass. You're going to have other fisheries that are going to create a new industry for people. And so it's something that people can switch to.
This is once the diversion is up and
Yes.
running and doing well.
Yes.
So this would make you happy to hear, right, Mr. Haas?
It would indeed. I think that.
But to hear Mr. Jurisic, though, he's really strong about they're killing us off.
Sure. Look, the diversion that we're talking about, the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion, is designed to change things in the basin. And change is always concerning. It's always a scary thing. I certainly understand that. And we have been very open and public about the fact that the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion will have some impacts within that basin. But it's really important to keep in mind the context of this basin, what's happened there historically over the last 100, 130 years or so. It's been changing from day one. People are not catching oysters today where they did 50 years ago. People aren't catching speckled trout today where they did 50 years ago, or bass for that matter. One constant in South Louisiana and coastal Louisiana is that there is change, right? And so, we talk about perhaps this project being a gamble. First of all, I completely disagree with that. Anywhere the river is connected to the coast, we see the benefits of that happening. But what I can say is certainly not a gamble is if we do nothing, if we don't do projects like these that are big and bold that can have the potential to sustain large portions of our coast for a long period of time. We know what will happen then. We've been experiencing it for the last 100 years. It's a dying estuary. Right. It's places on the map that have been removed because they're literally no longer there. And it's communities that can't live and work in areas that they have historically.
Okay. Representative Orshaw?
No one faults Mr. Jurisic for his position. I mean, third-generation oyster fisherman, we understand. I mean, his view's a little, I would call it myopic, in that he's not looking at the bigger picture that we all need to look at for sustainability. Like both Dr. Bowie and Mr. Haas had said, anywhere that the river's connected, you see life. And my particular area in Bayou Lafourche, even though my hometown is protected with a levee that protects us from Hurricane Ida and all the storm surges, we need that storm surge attenuation. And I would much rather see a freshwater swamp with growing, starting with duckweed and roseaux and tallow trees, and eventually getting to cypress and oak trees being that storm surge attenuation than just 3 feet of marsh grass as it's been for the last 100 years.
Well, thank you all so much. We have talked enough about past master plans. Let's discuss now what will happen with the current master plan in the upcoming legislative session. Here is Stuart Brown, the Assistant Administration Director for the CPRA, on what he expects.
So the master plan is a prioritization effort. There remains a lot of work to be done in terms of how we solicit the funding, how we engineer and design these projects. And so the hope is that the funding becomes available to build these projects. A lot of these projects already have some level of feasibility, some level of engineering design. Some of them are waiting on funding. But as I mentioned before, there are a handful of projects, certainly on the risk reduction side, that can be really effective, that are going to be critical to the future of coastal Louisiana.
Representative Orgeron, many of these projects have been funded by BP oil spill money, and that money is running out by the year 2032. With the master plan being a 50-year plan and the current plan looking forward to 2029, is there worry that money is going to run out?
Absolutely. Whenever we expend the rest of the BP oil spill money, we're starting to look now the ways to change federally, things like GOMESA with the RISE Act and the BREEZE Act, federal legislation that would remove the cap and allow larger shares of royalty and revenues from our offshore energy industries to go towards coastal restoration directly to that.
And Mr. Haas, let me ask the same question to you. Is there a concern that this money is going to run out?
Well, absolutely. It will if we don't do anything to backfill it. And Representative Orgeron, I think, highlighted many of the activities that are going on right now to try to do that into the future. But it also highlights, I think, the need for the kinds of projects that we've been talking about already that won't just last 10, 15, 20, or even 30 years. They'll last well into the future, 50 years and beyond, so that we can spend this flush of money wisely now on projects like the Mid-Barrier Sediment Diversion that can provide benefits well into the future.
How much of the $50 billion has been secured already?
So I want to start by saying that sort of the coast is, I would say it's analogous to the federal highway system, right? You're never done with it. You're always maintaining it. You're always improving it. There's always changes that can be made to it. Sure. And so even if we spent $50 billion in the next 2 years, which would be difficult to do, of course, but if we did that, we wouldn't be done with our coast. We're going to need to continue to maintain that into the future. That said, it's a constraint within which we sort of plan and select projects as part of the master plan. And to date, about a little over $21 billion has been secured for those kinds of projects.
And where did that money come from?
A lot of it has come from the federal government. And a lot of that has been invested in the greater New Orleans area and the hurricane risk reduction system around that metro area. The Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, Representative Orgeron mentioned just a moment ago, which is an offshore oil revenue sharing program with the four.
How much from BP?
About $8 billion.
$8 billion.
About $8 billion has come to the state, yep.
All right, that's not been the largest amount, but again, down the road, it continues. You need to secure the money, and you need to know where that's going to come from. What have you been hearing from your constituents about the current master plan? First, Representative Orgeron.
It was mentioned earlier about community engagement. We've had meetings, local community meetings, where people have come in. CPRA did a great job of explaining the framework of their project selections and then broke up people into individual groups where they voiced various concerns. You had commercial fishermen, just recreational fishermen, a whole swath of various people. So overall, they're very much in support of it. And as I said, with storm protection being one of the most important things, they realized that just having our levees that protected us from Hurricane Ida with open water beyond is not sustainable. We need the marsh, we need the buffer between the barrier islands and the northern extents of our levees to help attenuate the storm surge. So that overall, the acceptance of the coastal plan is a positive one.
Representative, do you think this master plan is going to be approved and funded, as Stuart Brown mentioned?
Yes, I do. I hope, as previous years, that it'll make its way through the legislature without any significant issues, and we'll be able to continue on with the progress that we've made thus far in the last several years.
And Mr. Haas?
I agree. I think that, look, there's lots of different things in our coastal master plan and what we implement in our coastal program, and I would venture a guess that north of 90% of it is almost universally agreed upon. We need to do these things. So there's lots of room for collaboration, lots of room for agreement, and lots of room for support, I think, for what we're trying to do.
All right, thank you for that. Our discussion tonight has laid it all out. The challenges are huge. We want to thank those participating, Dr. Bowie, Mr. McClendon, Mr. Macaluso, Representative Orgeron, and Mr. Haas for sharing their knowledge on these issues. So what do you, our viewers, think about all this? We encourage you to comment on tonight's show by visiting lpb.org/Louisiana Spotlight and clicking on the Join the Conversation link. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and good night.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.
Well, hello, I'm Clay Perrier with Louisiana Public Broadcasting. You've been watching Louisiana Spotlight on coastal erosion, a very important subject here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting. With me in the studio is Linda Mitchell, our executive producer, and Ben Johnson, our senior producer on this. So, Linda, everything that we see on Louisiana Spotlight, it's very interesting, it's very important, it's kind of like cut from the headlines. Tell me a little bit about the program.
Louisiana Spotlight is really the bedrock of public affairs programming that we do here at LPB, which is important. We have to cover topics that are important to the entire state. Past Louisiana Spotlights have been on the value of a teacher, on redistricting, other important topics, but the disappearing coastline, which we just saw this program about, is something that LPB has covered for decades, and I'm sure that we'll be covering it for decades to come.
Okay, and I understand that now you folks have put together the first Spotlight feature film, so to speak.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Go ahead.
Yes, so the first Spotlight film actually was born out of a Spotlight show.
Okay.
The first Spotlight show we ever did actually was on the Pointe-au-Chien Indian tribe. And so we kind of took that show and fleshed it out a little bit more, worked on it some more, and we've got an 82-minute feature film now on the Pointe-au-Chien tribe and on the coastal land loss at our state.
And this is the very first of the Spotlight films, I understand. It's going to premiere tomorrow at 7 p.m., so mark your calendars and tune in for that one. We have a very special little clip, I believe you folks have put together for us. Let's take a look at that one right now.
Pointe-au-Chien is one of the oldest communities in the state of Louisiana. Chitimacha, Washa, and Chawasha. So when the first Europeans came to Louisiana, this was inhabited.
Our children, we want to teach them that here, Lower Pointe-au-Chien is not where we began. We began past that.
Bala ne plus là, no more there.
Nothing left.
We are directly impacted by things that other people are deciding without our input. This was land right here.
That's the hardest, when you lose stuff like that. That's Malin, Reese, and Mount.
No, you think y'all's house is fixable?
I promise you.
Who's helping y'all the most right now?
Nobody.
Nobody. No idea.
What do I say to someone who says people shouldn't live here? Maybe they don't want us here because it'll just be a sportsman's paradise to go fishing, but this is our land.
They did like us, they adjusted.
This land is a reflection of us, our ancestors, because this is who we are.
Okay, remember everyone, you can see that premiering tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Linda, an amazing, amazing looking film.
Thank you. Well, I have to brag on Ben. He is the director of the film. He worked on this for several years. He shot a lot of it by himself, going down after Hurricane Ida. I mean, really tracking the devastation that this tribe experienced, the loss of land, the loss of culture. And I have to tell you, this is a story that it's very important to Louisiana, of course, but this is a story that's important to the nation and to the world.
Yes.
We actually had the United Nations reach out and say, hey, can we show some of this footage that we used in our original spotlight on this topic?
Okay.
They showed it at one of their conferences. And so we were, very honored by that, but it just shows that this is something that people really need to be aware of.
Absolutely.
So Ben, I would love for you to talk about the process of working with the tribe.
Yeah, I mean, I originally went down to Pointe-au-Chien because the school was closing, their elementary school. And so they granted me access to come and just talk to everyone in the tribe that I could. And there's kind of a vetting process, but it's been an incredible experience to kind of go down and talk with the people there and figure out their story and be able to tell it in such a way that I'm hoping people at home will be able to enjoy.
Okay, and again, that's going to be at 7 p.m., premiering tomorrow night right here on LPB, so tell everyone about it. And by the way, if you haven't yet, call that number 888-769-5000 or go online to lpb.org and make that pledge of support. You know, Linda, this type of reporting, this type of very special programming, it's what we do best here at LPB.
It's a service to the state. It's really important, but we have to have our member support in order to tell them.
That's right. We've got our Louisiana Production Fund, and you can be part of that, of creating more great content like you've seen here tonight, like you're going to see tomorrow night. We want you to be part of it. You can program LPB with more programs like you're going to see here coming up next and coming up tomorrow night at 7 p.m., but we can only do it with that pledge of support. We have these great programs, and thank you very much for this program because it looks like it's a fantastic winner on a subject matter, like we said, that's very, very important to Louisiana. In addition to the programs, we have some fantastic thank you gifts. Right now, let's take a look at those and give us a call. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
When you become a member, you help LPB share important stories about Louisiana. As our way to say thank you, we invite you to choose from these incredible gifts. For $30 a month, receive the combo, 3 beautiful pottery pieces from Wortman Pottery, handcrafted right here in Louisiana, including the oval oyster plate, the double oyster shell, and the oyster mug, plus the signed photographic print collection by America's photographer Carol Highsmith. The set includes Coastal Marsh, Louisiana Shrimp Boat, and Fort Proctor. The combo also includes the book Ain't There No More, Louisiana's Disappearing Coastal Plain, and receive a DVD of the Louisiana Spotlight film, The Precipice. For $15 a month, receive the Wortman Pottery Collection, the oval oyster plate, and the double oyster shell. For $10 a month, receive Ain't There No More, Louisiana's Disappearing Coastal Plain, winner of the 2018 Louisiana Literary Award. For $8 a month, choose the Oyster Mug by Wortman Pottery. Or for just $6 a month, choose a DVD of the Louisiana Spotlight film, The Precipice. Plus, at all levels, you receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, and LPB Passport, the streaming service for the best of PBS and LPB.